Crash at TNB. This long-anticipated movie of Dune has finally dropped, and you know what that means. Book versus movie. The overall tone of the book was a slow burn with an intense character and world development. Would we expect anything else from the movie? Not at all. I was originally skeptical of hearing we would only be getting a portion of the first book, but my friends, it is worth the watch, especially if you love comparisons like I do. Now, I will only be talking about just the first book because that is what the movie touched on, and yes, spicy spoilers will happen, of course.
My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low.
Leto is the Duke of Atreides, and he is requested by the Emperor to move to Arrakis after removing the Harkonnens from the spice business. Upon their arrival to Arrakis, they evaluate the equipment is flawed, that their desert enemy is the sandworm, and if they don't work their moves right, enemy to the freemen as well. Little did the Duke know that there was betrayal in his own backyard. Upon the Duke Leto's death and the Harkonnens retaking the spice lands of Arrakis, Paul rises to his true calling as the One and builds a beginning friendship with the freemen. His visions are also becoming a reality, finally meeting Chani, literally the woman of his dreams. As I have already mentioned, the book is a slow burn that ends in a burning fire of what happens next. In a way, I wanted this in the movie too, and was not disappointed. Honestly, the director chosen was the perfect fit for this kind of style. Just look at his track history, like Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, the sci-fi slow burns. I could see how some may not like that kind of style of a movie, but this movie does keep you hooked in the political and intense world being built around you. Even the musical tone and all-around sound effects really encompassed you in the movie and the dark surroundings you were in. It was even cool to find out that the composer wanted, since childhood, to do the music for this specific movie. What an achievement. Even the actors' portrayals were well placed for how the characters felt or were going through in the book. The movie, in my opinion, deserves a chef's kiss. Which leads us to our settings. The worlds these characters had to survive on were designed flawlessly, from Caladan being of oceans and continuous rain, and the beautifully detailed archways was exactly how I imagined it in the book. Same with being on Arrakis and its desert lands. Capturing a desert land can be difficult to sometimes make beautiful and literally feel the heat you could be experiencing in that person's shoes. But the pure distinction between sand and spice was amazingly captured, especially when Paul was in the tent and he lit a light. The spice seriously sparkled. It was mesmerizing. On the other hand, some of the aircraft designs just seemed useless. They didn't seem usable or well functionable. Honestly, they kind of looked eh. For example, the spacecraft in physical space or the round ball that they decide to bring the Bene Gesserit to Caladan didn't make any sense. Don't even get me started on the chess piece crafts landing on Arrakis. But I will give them credit for the pre-designed equipment that was already on Arrakis. Now, the design for the spotter crafts of sandworms was a more thought-out design. Even the dragonfly-style thopter was very unique. Same for the carryall having a hot air balloon design to help lift the crawlers, sifting the sand and spice. Granted, the crawler kinda reminded me of the Jawas vehicles, but that is besides the point.
What if I'm not Dad? You'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be, my son.
The attention to detail in the designs of the characters' clothing was very specific, especially for such a unique world. When Paul had a dress for the ceremony, you saw the hawk-like detail on his shirt collar. This was mentioned in the book, but the detail in the movie was a nice added touch. Even the description of the still suit was quite accurate. Dr. Kynes talked about how a good conditioned suit won't lose more than a thimble of water, but the recycling of power and sweat will allow rehydration when it's properly fitted. This was well discussed. Granted, the description was not quite the same in the book, talking about a micro sandwich for how the suit functions, but the slightly added twist was still plainly understood. We also get the same reaction from Kynes about Paul's knowledge of the boot's fastening, stating, "He shall know your ways as though born to them." I will even give a little appreciation of the bull, and the picture of the grandfather were also well placed in the movie, just like the book. I mean, I didn't see any blood on the bull from the grandfather's death, but maybe that is just a little bit of my morbid side coming out. Some of the characters' appearances were not accurate, like Gurney. The book described him as blonde, and honestly, I did envision him more like Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones, but the movie had Gurney with a buzz cut, which ended up fitting the more appropriate appearance of Josh Brolin. His initial interactions with Training Paul was just like the book though, especially talking about moods and fighting when it's necessary. I would be curious if we ever get to see him playing a tune, or give Paul a copy of his own Bible. Duncan, Idaho didn't have much time in the book, and same for the movie. I'm not normally a Jason Momoa fan, but I thoroughly enjoyed him in this movie. He represented Duncan rather well, not only in his appearances, but even in his interactions with Paul. His death still occurred, and not gonna lie, I was bummed by this. But keeping to the story was still more than okay in my book. But his skills in battle were fantastic. The shield takes high impact forces, but slow movement penetrates the shield. It's a shield weakness. You actually physically see Duncan quickly lunge, but his action of slicing is slow yet swift. This was a great acting and watchfulness of the story's detail. Paul was amazingly portrayed. Not only was his appearance spot on with an ovalish-like face, hair black, and the Duke's thin, disdainful nose. I guess we could settle for the brown eyes instead of green. I guess that's okay. But his acting was fantastic, and there was not a moment you didn't know what kind of emotion he needed to feel. We also grew with him on learning his path to being the one. Even though it has not been completely clarified in the movie just yet, but we get the pieces. We see him grow to use the voice. When he first uses it in the action of moving the glass of water, he isn't very well focused, but when he finally learns the correct pitch, it is when he tells his mother to get away from him. The impact was unbelievable. We are also with Paul when he is experiencing the spice that affects his visions. They get intense and clearer than ever before, especially as he gets closer to Chani. We come to understand how the spice affects him on a much deeper level. We did also get some other minor details like Leto having a beard versus being clean-shaven due to being described as having a thin face with harsh angles. I do love the rugged beard, and I'm normally not into that kind of style choice, but Oscar Isaacs could pull it off. I enjoyed getting the sympathetic portion of Leto while interacting with Stilgar and saving the men in the crawler. We also get his discussions with Paul and teaching him the ways and knowing when the time is right, but we didn't get his full potential of love. Yes, we see him tenderly touch or acknowledge Jessica in some small pieces, but we never see the deeper portion of him stating poetry or even telling Paul to not believe his mother could cause any kind of treason. But as for the accuracy, I could not get over the Baron. The amount of repulsion, ugly, and overweight description the book described, I felt was clearly covered in his appearances for the movie. In fact, the book even stated the Baron shifted his gross body in the suspenders. He straightened the padded suspensor beneath the fat folds of his neck. And later in the book, it even states, he doesn't appear much, does he? One frightened old fat man too weak to support his own flesh without the help of suspenders. It was quite cool to see the suspenders in action by floating him across spaces or locations. It was still disturbing though to see him in general, but the style was definitely well done. Lastly, my only other notice of differences was Liette Kynes was female versus a male in the book. Minor detail change that again wasn't really a complaint or a big, oh no, why kind of moment. It wasn't clarified and it could change, but is Kynes the aunt or mother of Chani? In the book, Kynes was the father of Chani, so I am curious how different the outcome could be. But let's at least take a moment of the perfect interpretation of the Freeman blue eyes. It was so unique and I couldn't help but not stare.
Tonight the bloodline ends forever. Kill them all.
Honestly, I can't stress enough on the just straight up appearance of the Baron. Every ounce of me wanted to hold back the need of vomiting, seeing this man's actions of straight up chewing in your face, or even the sweating pouring off of this man. Super disgusting. But the movie didn't disappoint in the body shields. Seeing it in person was breathtaking. We see it on the stillsuit's design and even in the Baron's, I guess, office, where he has a shield that dampens noise and protects him. The concept was super cool to see on screen, especially when the stillsuits are being attacked and they radiate a red color. The movie places you into the political aspect that does not drown you due to the pacing, which helps the story build up for why Leto of Atreides is being relocated by the Emperor and then later killed. The movie does well to balance both Leto and Paul, so when the time comes for the character to shine in their own way, it is well placed. Whereas in the book, it threw you right into Paul having to be tested by Reverend Mother. The book's beginning tended to be more confusing and clearly focused around Paul, and then the political aspect of his father. personally, I enjoyed the movie's startup just for the sole purpose of being a steady ground of the situation while still questioning what is going on. In general, when we see the action of Paul getting tested with pain by Reverend Mother, it was extremely intense. My palms physically got sweaty, and when he passes the test and Reverend Mother has to interact further with Jessica about how she has given him more than the one birthright and should have stuck to a daughter, was nearly perfect to the book. I mean, Reverend Mother was nasty enough to even make Jessica have tears in her eyes. I even have to point out the actions or descriptions of the visions Paul sees either in forced moments or when they come to him. They were so descriptive. We are physically with Paul seeing his future or what could be the future. We see the burning of the date tree, the Krisk knife in the sand, the friendship that could have happened with Jameis, and possibly his death by Chani. The way this was compiled was visually stimulating, and I really appreciated the way it was done. I actually enjoyed the scene of the poison dart with the hunter seeker in the movie more than the book. I felt a little lost in the book when it occurred. I feel it was because of the way it was described, but it was still an important scene, and I'm glad we got to see it play out. Now, it did lack the finding of the water-efficient and life-preserving conservatory room. Rather, we get a small conservatory glimpse with Kynes in one of the Sietch's ecological testing facilities, so I guess that is satisfactory, but in a way, I feel the book did it better just for the sole purpose of showing how precious water is to the people of Arrakis, and I will describe a little bit more about this in the book section of this video. When Paul and Jessica are held captive and one of the men is deaf, it was more appreciative in the movie in comparison to the book, because Jessica and Paul are to be signing to each other, and honestly, it was a tad difficult to imagine, but it was nicer in general to see it on the screen. Also, just in general, the action of the voice being utilized. The impact it had, along with the echo of voices intermixed with the Gesserit, was very impressive. Whenever it was utilized or could be used, it was super cool. I could not get enough. I mean, when Paul finally has the full impact of the situation of losing his father, being the Duke of Arrakis, and finding in himself that he is the one, his pure reaction to Jessica was hatred mixed with this impressive voice. You got the full scale of the emotions along with the voice becoming one with him. Definitely not a disappointing scene.
The Emperor asks us to bring peace to Arrakis!
Before either I or you as a viewer forgets, let's lightly discuss the preciousness of the water. We saw on Caladan that water was everywhere. It wasn't a concern. Leto even expresses, on Caladan we ruled with sea and air power. Here we must scrabble for desert power. This is your inheritance, Paul. But on Arrakis, the book even points out further during guest gatherings the action of drinking a glass of water after a toast and then throwing the glass and its remaining contents on the floor. The guests seem appalled but follow the actions. Soon after in the book, we find out that the leftover water on the ground is cleaned up and then sold to the lower class in the city for extra consumption and side money. When Leto finds this out, he makes a change of traditions where during dining hours, a basin of water is provided to anyone who requests a cup. He was taking into account the sacredness of water. Now, the movie, in a way, places the same action of how the date tree is thriving by the action of water being poured near its roots daily, and that one tree is equivalent to 5 lives that we soon find out affects 100 lives in reality daily. Paul took the lead role of asking to even remove the trees. Now, it still has a similar effect of sacredness, but it didn't necessarily feel as powerful for a moment. This is also my personal thought. Of course, the movie still pulled the sacredness of water by spitting on the table to acknowledge Duke Leto or making the spiced coffee, but the action of crying after Paul killed Jameis never occurred. If Paul would have cried in the movie, he would have given moisture to the dead, which is very sacred amongst the Freemen. The book had more treachery and scheming on the political end, showing the back end of Yue plotting his actions along with another character I will not mention in case of a second movie, which has now actually been approved. If you read the book, you know who I mean. Also, the information we know about the Freemen is when we are with the Freemen. I do give the movie credit for how it decided to give the information without overwhelming or making people angry for more questions. We already had a lot of questions for this new world of Arrakis, and questions questions on the Harkonnens, the Emperor, and wanting more information on the One, but we did need to know about the Freeman because that is Paul's destiny of aligning with them. We as a viewer are seeing visions of a girl Chani, so the implication of using a hologram training of the Freeman and the way they survive in the desert and utilize the desert power by interlocking their lives around the sandworms was brilliant to give the necessary information to us. Deep down, I did like the mystery of the Freeman in the book because we learned with Paul of their way of living. We also learned with Paul the treacheries behind closed doors while also being in those traitors' minds along the way. To say the least, the book was unique in that it provided the necessary information at the most interesting time, and I did prefer this. But I still give the movie credit as well for adapting to the viewers. The book in general was just best for giving exposition and just dive deeper into their beliefs or actions of taking political power over each other. Literally a bunch of betrayal everywhere. It was so deep. The movie was just too loud with the background music at these very important whispered moments that the audience wouldn't catch without subtitles. One of them is a very big quote used between Paul and Jessica, being of the teaching of the Bene Gesserit. We get this detailed quote of, "Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past me, I will turn to see fear's path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain." Jessica utilizes this line while Paul is being tested by the Gamjabar. And during the movie, it was completely passed up. You could not hear it. Remember, I only went into spoilers for the first portion of the book and what the movie has covered as of yet. Drop all of your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the movie. What comparisons did I miss? I know there is so much to still talk about, so mention it down below. Would you be excited for a second movie, especially since it's now been confirmed? Don't forget to also like and subscribe to get more videos just like this. So stay nerdy and keep binging.